there, so.
Alright, I gotta catch up towards your antithesis, and then we'll be able to antithesis, yoga speak, antithesis, yay, bless you, there we go. Alright, so yesterday we started going through different forms of eloquence. I'm hopeful that today we can finish it off. You do not have a quiz on Monday or anything like that for the eloquence. We will do a quiz next Friday. Next week we're going to take a look at Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech, and we're going to run through it. I don't mean this as like a test assignment or anything, but we're going to run through that where you're going to be able to see all the types of eloquence that we're talking about, both the schemes, which we're doing right now with syntax, and the tropes, which are going to be more like metaphorical language. You'll be able to see examples of all of them within King's speech, just so you can kind of see the usefulness of them and how they can work. By no means am I trying to get you to use all of these concepts within a speech that you do. It's probably not going to be natural for someone to utilize all of these elements over and over again. But the hope would be that you certainly could implement, maybe 3, 4, 5 of them, and again, as ways to emphasize certain points, not trying to change the way that anyone talks. And like with your Sparta debates, I was very impressed with the way that folks were conveying their ideas and messages. Volume was good, rates were good. We didn't have anyone speaking super fast or sloth-like slowness that we have on Justin's shirt or anything. So the deliveries were good. So the whole idea is just to try to emphasize and make the points maybe a little bit stronger in some ways. Assonance we have up here, repetition of similar vowel sounds and stressed syllables of adjacent words. I think sometimes folks get a little confused with assonance because with alliteration, the sense that, so do I have to start off my words with the vowel, like under the desk is my umbrella, I have 2 U sounds? No. The whole idea is that you have the same at least kind of vowel sound, and you tend to see this a little bit more in poetry than prose. It could be rhyming words, but they don't have to rhyme in order for it to be assonance. So you have some alliteration taking place in the silken sad, but uncertain rustling of each purple curtain. Certainly certain curtain has some rhyming, but purple, curtain, purple, certain, that sound you're getting repetition of. So a lot of poetry tends to use it. Poe uses it big time. Those of you in AP Lit are going to get a headache, but T.S. Eliot uses it a good amount of time. So it's something that certainly does get utilized. I think alliteration is the more common one, though, when it's going to come to a prose speech, something that you would deliver.
With the quiz on this, is it going to be like examples?
Definitions. Be definitions. So you could still have assonance and alliteration, but you'd have at least something similar to repetition of similar vowel sounds, and you don't. I'll be matching. Going into it, I think you probably consider it to be an easier quiz. The one thing that you're probably starting to notice, alliteration, assonance, antidiphlosis, anaphora, antimetaboly, there's a lot of A terms with it. So it's probably keeping those things straight more so than anything else. So you don't want to come up with that demonic device of, ooh, I'll remember this definition because the word begins with an A. Potentially you could have 7 different words that begin with A. I mean, we didn't even get to analogy yet and all that kind of stuff. O.J. Simpson trial, Johnny Cochran's probably his most famous line, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. Again, that would be rhyming, but you're having the assonance that would be taking place there. And some of your teachers' favorite movies from the mid-1980s. Tom Cruise, Top Gun, Feel the Need, Need for Speed. That movie's 32 years old. Does your mom like that movie too?
I don't know.
Not sure. Used to be on TV all the time. I haven't seen it as much lately. I'm not even going to play the YouTube clip for it because I just don't really feel like it. There's a new Mission Impossible, right?
Yeah, July 27th.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Do you have all the movie release dates memorized? That was impressive.
I have a lot of them.
Okay. I think we might go see Peter Rabbit tomorrow, so I'm going to see if I get offended by food allergies and EpiPens. Let's see. I don't feel like going anywhere with all of you. No offense.
That would be fun.
I'm going to stand outside. Don't go see this movie. When we were talking about anadiplosis, I mentioned to you climax, saying that we would get to it. This is one where like anadiplosis and climax can have some carryover. It's kind of like the I meant to do that on accident. It's kind of like the you can consider a square can be a rectangle, but a rectangle is not necessarily a square kind of thing. Anadiplosis you can look at as being climactic, as being an example of climax, but you can't necessarily say that climax by default is going to be anadiplosis. I used to play Smashing Pumpkins for this, but then it freaked everybody out.
What song?
Zero.
Oh, that
Yeah.
Crazy Side one.
Yeah, that was the part that freaked everybody out. I should have brought it back. That whole like emptiness is loneliness, that part. So what it is, it's the arrangement of words, phrases, or clauses, and you're going in an order of increasing importance. So I went from Smashing Pumpkins to William Shakespeare. Nice little transition. Remember, that's William Shakespeare, that's not me. That's really Mr. Kern, but Bryn still thinks it's me. She's not here, so don't, Why are you laughing? Why can't it be me?
Why did they put Mr. Kern?
Why not?
You told us.
Why? Just say it's you.
I do, and she believes me. I admit that the one up there is Mr. Kern, but I tell her that one's me.
There's no problem then.
That's right. So we have the Shakespeare lines. It's from Sonnet. Beauty is but a vain and doubtful good, a shining gloss that fadeth suddenly, a flower that dies when first it begins to bud, a brittle glass that's broken presently, a doubtful good, a gloss, a glass, a flower, lost, faded, broken, dead within an hour. So really when you get to this part down here, a doubtful good, a gloss, a glass, a flower, lost, faded, broken, and then dead within an hour, that's the increasing importance that's kind of coming. So it goes from something that is being absolutely beautiful to something that is gone very, very soon. A lot of times you'll have some things, and the Yoda example would be like this as well with the anadiplosis. Oh, and I even forget the order that was going in, what, hate leads to anger, or anger leads to fear, whatever the order was. You could argue that that is climactic, and that would be fine. So if it were, and we're going with definitions on a quiz, but say I had like that Yoda example, if Jack were to put it as anadiplosis and you put it as climax, wouldn't be able to argue because you can make a case for both. For this one, if I had this up here, you could not argue anadiplosis because you're not getting that repetition at the end of one sentence and then at the beginning of the next, as you were with the Yoda speech or the Beatles song or Zero lyrics and stuff like that. So arrangement of words, you're just kind of building up to the main point that you are certainly trying to get across. All right. And then parallelism. And this one's kind of like a catch-all. Certainly things like anaphora, epistrophe, you can argue would be parallelism, but this doesn't necessarily have to be within that vein. So you got a similarity of structure in a pair or series of related words, phrases, clauses. We mutually pledge to each other within the declaration our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. You could argue, and you would be correct, that not only is this parallelism, but what other device scheme that we've already mentioned yesterday. Since we have our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Not epistrophe, the other one. Because epistrophe is going to be the repetition at the end, but this would be the anaphora where it's the repetition at the beginning. So parallelism, you could argue that it's parallelism. You could argue that it's anaphora. The next example that I'll show you, though, wouldn't work as epistrophe or anaphora, and therefore it would have to be parallelism. So epistrophe, anaphora are types of parallelism where you have that repetition of sentence structure. They are just certainly specific types that you are repeating. Here, with JFK, let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and success of liberty. That you would have to say parallelism. You couldn't argue epistrophe or anaphora. You have repetition of sentence structure where you have verb and then the word any, and then a noun, a concept, an idea that is coming behind it. So pay any price, bear any burden, verb, any, and then the noun. That would be a parallelism that would not work as anaphora, would not work as epistrophe. There's not a special term where that repetition of any in the middle ends up being like some other kind of term. You would just simply go parallelism for that. Okay. Anaphora, epistrophe, parallelism, all good when you're trying to give different, whether it be subtopics, concepts, ideas, could even be people, an equal representation where you're not trying to make one seem more important than another, but you want everything to be on the same footing. Parallelism is pretty good for that. Anadiplosis, climax is good where you're trying to put more emphasis on one concept, so you build the other ones up to this one big main idea, main point that you're trying to do. All right, so all of those were schemes. The ones that we're going to look at now are tropes. So tropes involve a change from the ordinary and primary meaning of a word or phrase to something else. You basically know it, for the most part, as figurative language. So the anaphora, the epistrophe, all that stuff, you weren't changing the meaning of words, but you were manipulating the order of words. For tropes, it's essentially figurative language. You could be playing with double meanings. You could be doing something such as puns, although we're not going to put that on here. But more like metaphor, simile, personification type things, those are going to be tropes. Since you were asking about words and definitions, schemes and tropes can show up as like just a term, scheme, trope, besides the specific devices itself. And I'll put like 10 words on there.
Are you have to know which is which? Like the anaphora is a scheme.
No. I mean, you should, but there's not going to be like a follow-up, which of these are tropes, which of these are schemes kind of thing. This is not a trope, but this is an awesome video, so we're going to watch it anyway. Oh, wait, gotta make sure we got sound. Hold on. Oh, we do. Yes.
Oh, yes! 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 We got it, baby! We got it! We got it!
You should live every day of your life like he's living his life.
Yes! Listen to that! Listen to that!
Did you hear it?
Baby!
That was thunder snow.
Oh! Again! Again! That's a twofer! That's a twofer, baby! Yes! That's a twofer!
That's a twofer.
Twofer, baby! Oh my goodness! Yes! Yes! Again! That's a three! You gotta be
He almost said
kidding
that's a
me.
threefer, but he was like, that doesn't sound right.
Para! Oh my God! The winds have really picked up and through here. And there's another one! That's number... You gotta be kidding me!
He's gotta like collect himself.
Storming?
Yes, it's like
Speechless.
Wow! You can have your $500 million jackpot in Powerball or whatever the heck it was, but I'll take this, baby. Four lightning strikes, 4 episodes of Thunder Snow. I could hear thunder, so we had another one. So we actually had five strikes, 5 thunder. I mean, this is just a total change. Literally within an hour. Was that another one? Was that? Oh my good, dude, that's number 6. You gotta be kidding me. Dude, I'm telling you, this is Chicago. Postel, this is Chicago all over again. We're just sitting in the middle of it.
Every time he says it's Chicago, I think of like Transformers movie when Chicago gets destroyed. I'm like, oh, that's disappointing. The thunderstorm knocked it out.
Is that thunder snow or is it just wait, I don't like lightning?
wait, does that have to do anything with eloquence?
It has to do with awesomeness.
Okay, I'm okay with
That's
that. I
fine.
was just wondering.
Actually, I want to watch Twofer again. That's a twofer. Oh, I'm only watching on my iPad. Oh well, I guess I'll skip it. That's a twofer, baby.
The next time, like, Thunder's gonna pay for that.
So next time you're in a
Okay.
snowstorm. See if you got thunder going on, and if you get thunder snow.
Is that like uncommon or something?
I'm hoping, based on his reaction, that it must be.
It's not like somewhat.
Thunder snow will not make it to your quiz next Friday, but I think metaphor we're probably okay with so far as definition. You know, implied comparison between two unlike things. There's some kind of tenuous connection between the two. Not using the words like or as. I bet you can figure out what the next definition would be. It would be simile. Sometimes people go, when should I use a metaphor? When should I use a simile? If you are trying to make a comparison for an audience that you are assuming isn't as knowledgeable about the subject, it's probably a good idea to go with a simile. You know, like as makes the comparison more obvious, more direct. So if you're trying to explain a concept, break it down, make it knowledgeable to them, hey, it would kind of be like, and you're making that comparison. If you're dealing with an issue that you think your audience is already going to be familiar with, and you want it to have maybe a little bit more impact, that's when the metaphor, I think, kind of comes into play. So, you know, Justin's an animal, like a sloth. Well, like right now one's a simile for it, but, you know, Justin's slothness was evident today as he came in late and clearly slow. So you can kind of go with the metaphor aspect there. But it's a little bit of a stronger comparison than what you would be getting with simile. So, you know, it is hot, or the flames of hell set us ablaze in August. That player is aggressive. That player is an animal. Clear examples of metaphor that would be taking place. Simile, I'll hold another example here for you. President Clinton's inaugural address, his first one. The ceremony was held in the depth of winter, but by the words we speak and the faces we show the world, we force the spring. So obviously not making spring actually come, but appropriate in the sense that you're having this ceremony within January, but forcing a change, a new change is going to be happening to America. Also, to kind of still go with our weather metaphors that we have, this Vice President Al Gore, Oklahoma city bombing taking place in 1995, I think that was. At the dawn of spring last year, a single act of terror brought forth the long, cold winter in our hearts. So, you know, certainly metaphor within speeches tends to be a pretty common one that you would have. Similes. So this is going to be a little bit more explicit comparison between two things of unlike nature, but you're using now like or as to show that connection. So it is as hot as hell in here, according to Dante, or that player is like a scared mouse out there on the field. Erica, did you guys like list your sins?
Yeah.
What was the worst? What was like the not worst?
We were gonna put walking on the wrong side of the hallway, but then we put
Does that include the stairwell? Because
absolutely.
I feel like the stairwell is worse than the hallway.
Yeah, so we didn't think walking on the wrong side of the hallway / stairwell would be acceptable.
Was there so many that you had to come up with, or 20?
What was number 2?
I showed you my list yesterday, John. Terrorism.
Yeah, at that point you still had walking the wrong side of the hallway.
No, you were looking at the wrong side of the pizza.
Number 2 as in like right behind murder, or number 2 as in right behind walking on the wrong side of the hallway? Well, or you switched it.
And then he told me it's supposed to be like sins that are relevant to our lives. None of us are relevant to our lives.
That's good when it comes to murder, and yeah. What's your biggest pet peeve? I think the stairwell thing might be for me.
My biggest issue is when you're out there and everybody's done their meal, but the adults haven't finished their beers, so you sit there for 20 minutes while they drink their beers really slowly.
That's my mom with coffee. And then right as she like finishes, and I'm like, yes. Can I have a refill? And then
I hate people like sit there mumbling.
Yep.
Like I hate that.
the sound.
Yeah,
so
it's
gross.
so
So annoying.
I don't think anybody does that.
My mother-in-law does.
My parents, my
My
dad,
parents do it all the time.
like,
It's literally.
My mother-in-law drinks her tea with a spoon, And so it's like,
Yeah, that's.
It's gonna take her like 45 minutes to
Eric
finish
was
that comment.
all the
Yeah.
way out. Okay. When you
and the worst part about it though, Jack, is then like the kids want to mimic it. So look, I'm Nana drinking her tea, and then we got,
It's different. It's like one.
and then I go, thanks a lot, Nana. Savannah, I get along with my mother-in-law. It's okay. Hyperbole, so use of exaggerated terms for the purpose of emphasis or heightened effect. I mentioned to you yesterday that you're going to have a requirement in your next speech, and we're actually going to start brainstorming the topics for the next speech, probably Tuesday of next week. You have to use like at least 3 examples of eloquence. I feel like hyperbole is one of the most commonly misused ones, or not misused, actually personalization, which I'll show you later, gets misused. Hyperbole is one that a lot of folks will tend to try to use, and it just kind of falls flat. So you want to make sure that when you use it, you're not just doing exaggeration, but you are trying to use exaggeration for the purpose of emphasis or a heightened effect about a main issue, main idea. You don't want to just kind of slide hyperbole into like a random part within a speech, within an idea, and hope that people recognize it, but you really want to try to use to kind of emphasize your main idea. The issue becomes you also at the same time you don't want to lie about it or make it seem as if you're coming up with like false information, where there are 100 million criminals running around the streets of Pittsburgh. You could get someone going, Mr. Mann, I don't think there's really 100 million criminals in Pittsburgh. I don't think there's really 100 million people in Allegheny County, so that's a little bit of an exaggeration. You have to be careful when you use it. I would stay away from statistics or something like that when you're talking about the way that people drink their drinks or always on their cell phones or everyone in the world walks on the wrong side of the hallway, after lunch. That would be a time that you could get away with it. And you're probably not going to have someone go, I was walking on the right side of the hallway after lunch, so clearly it's not everyone. But statistics, numbers, probably a good idea to avoid when it comes to using hyperbole. Holden Caulfield never uses any hyperboles in his everyday speech. Evelyn, you still reading the book?
Yeah, we finished.
Oh, you finished it?
Yeah.
Do you like Holden?
I do.
You do?
Yeah.
Justin didn't like Holden?
He's like the worst for
Whiny little punk?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
He just been lying the whole book. That's the book.
Jack thought he was a whiny little punk.
And the ending just was so stupid.
Yeah,
It was.
It
It
was.
was.
It's on a merry-go-round.
You like Holden?
Holden was a pain in the
I'm
ass.
trying my best, okay?
Thankfully, none of us in here are opinionated teenagers who think we know everything.
I don't think anything. I know a lot of things.
Do you have a million gray hairs? No. I'm starting to get a couple hundred now. It's bothering me. And they grow faster than the other hair, so like that gray hair sticks out. I plucked 7 of them last night. All right, analogy. Folks will go, well, what's the difference between an analogy and like a simile or a metaphor? Because you're still comparing things. Analogy simply means that it's going to be either an extended metaphor or a long simile. So it's a comparison, a simile, or a metaphor that you keep going back to over and over again. So if you make a one-time comparison between 2 things, you most likely have a simile or a metaphor. If within the content of, let's say, a speech or an essay, even if you're just doing this for writing, if you spend like a paragraph developing an idea, now you're talking analogy at this point, or writing analogy. So an extended metaphor, a long simile, those would both be considered analogies. So a one-time comparison, simile, metaphor. But some kind of comparison that you keep going back to over and over and over again to help to make the audience have a better understanding of what it is that you're talking about, that's going to be an analogy. So if you spend like multiple sentences, you're probably using an analogy as opposed to a simile or a metaphor. Pet peeves when teachers play with prezzies.
Mr. Bedrowski.
He goes like 10
He goes
steps
back
ahead.
and
Wait,
forth.
copy
He
this
can't
down.
stay on
Click,
one
click, click,
slide.
click.
Oh my god.
Oh my god. So worse.
And then we all scream
And then he gets all defensive.
He's like, it's my class.
and he throws a sexist joke in there. Just
You're so mean.
we're like arguing with him. Sounds to me.
What do you think about you two?
I love it too.
I don't remember where I saw him on TV recently. I was like, oh my goodness, did he get old?
Yeah, I saw him on their tour this summer. He's pretty old.
I'm in the middle. I'm indifferent.
I mean, I can understand when people hate them, but it's kind of annoying.
Bono, lead singer of U2, who is starting to look like a mummy, said, wishing for an end to AIDS and extreme poverty in Africa is like wishing that gravity didn't make things so heavy. We can wish it, but what can we really do about it? And then he kind of kept on going with it. So that'd be an example of an analogy. Favorite Bono story would be, like, I think they were in Australia and he did the thing where he snaps his fingers. Probably told you this one already. He was on stage snapping his fingers and he said, every time I snap my fingers, a child in Africa dies. And so then Jack stood up and said, well, then stop snapping your fingers then. Bono. You know, just like at the rate, you know, every second or 1.3 seconds a person dies in Africa due to starvation. And so they said, well, stop snapping your fingers. What about Owen Wilson?
He's a joke.
He annoys me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's only good as the voice of Lightning McQueen. That's it.
His face just.
That's Owen.
Hey, Vince Vaughn is good though. I like this one.
But I love that book and I want to see the movie, but I can't watch a movie with Ellen Wilson.
Which one?
Maybe we watch movies.
Oh yeah.
Because the book is really good.
I have not seen the movie. And we were kind of, I don't, because he's the father, right? And yeah.
I don't know if I can.
Yeah.
But then also like one part.
The book is good. Wonder.
Like,
Oh.
beginning one was like,
You did see the movie?
it's
Yeah.
just car crashes
Did you read the
in 5
book?
seconds.
Yeah. Vince Vaughn, line about Owen Wilson, feel guilty about winning the award because it's not that hard of a thing to do. When you work with someone like Owen Wilson, you kind of feel like a jockey on the back of a great horse like Secretariat. My job is to simply hold on and let it go. But Vince Vaughn says this about Owen Wilson because Vince Vaughn won, I think it was like a People Choice Award. I don't remember if it was for Wedding Crashers or one of the other movies that they did together.
Wasn't Owen Wilson in like
I didn't see it. You know what? He was in what's the movie that takes where he's the writer and he goes back in time. No. Something Paris. He was pretty good in that one. He's a writer, and then and he ends up being like F. Scott Fitzgerald and Hemingway.
As soon as he says wow, I'm like done.
I don't watch movies.
Wait, what's the movie that just came out with him and Ed Helms in it? Ed Helms. Yeah. It was really bad. It came out.
It was so bad I didn't know about him.
Yeah. Okay, never mind. It was really bad.
Because Helms is from
The Office.
The Office, and then he was also in the Vegas movie. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not nice.
No, I don't know which one you're talking about. I forgot Ed Helms even existed. Personalization. This is the one that sometimes folks will try to get it with saying, hey, Mr. Kane, I used personalization in my speech. Did you catch it? And I go, no, you really didn't. I realize that you think you did, but you didn't. Personalization is when you put yourself or at least personal experiences into the context of the speech. So Martin Luther King, and this is I have a dream, and it's not him simply going that I have a dream is personalization, but that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they'll not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of the character. The emphasis for the personalization would be the use of my 4 little children. Folks will say something like, I think that people walk on the wrong side of the hallway, in school. I use the word I, therefore it is personalization because I used I. No, you have to put yourself into the speech, or at least people that you know, personal experiences into it. If you did a personal anecdote about yourself, that could certainly count as personalization. But just because you use the word like me, my, I, us, we, automatically doesn't end up making it being personalization. So just because you use those pronouns, you're not necessarily personalizing. But if you incorporate yourself into the context of it, you certainly do. One of the more common types of eloquence devices that folks will use would be allusion. This could be reference to a previous work, historical event, or person. Couple things though with allusions. Oh, Ellen.
For personalization, can you use just like a short personal story for the argument?
Yeah, so long as the story ties into the point that you're trying to get across, you're fine. So when you use personalization, you are going to use like I, me, or mine. The issue becomes when folks go, in my argument, I will prove that, and they feel that, well, I used the word I used the word my, therefore I have personalized it. No, because you haven't put yourself or your experiences into it. But if you were to do a story about, I remember during my freshman year, and you go into an anecdote, that's going to be personalization because now there's a story, you're in the actual content of it. Allusion. So reference to historical person, place, event. Two things you have to make sure. Number one, people know who you're referencing. If you have to explain the allusion, it's not going to work. And number two, you have to make sure that the person or the event that you are alluding to actually matches up with the content that you're looking at. So if you were going to be giving a speech, about the democracy and American freedom, you don't want to start off with like a Karl Marx, Joseph Stalin quote or something like that. It tends not to work. But yes, people still will do that. Now, for an allusion, it could be a direct or it can be an inferred. Thomas Jefferson believed that to preserve the very foundations of our nation, we need dramatic change from time to time. That's a direct allusion because he's mentioning Thomas Jefferson. That would be perfectly fine. If he were to state, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, continue to be American ideals, and he doesn't say Declaration of Independence, that's still going to be an allusion because he's alluding to famous document, famous quote, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. So it can be a direct allusion where you make a very clear connection, or it can be one that's inferred. And the very last one we're going to do, imagery, sensory words. Words that appeal to senses, create pictures in the audience's mind. Most of the time that folks write about imagery, they go with visual things, but I put sensory words up there just to reinforce it can also be smell, taste, touch, hearing. It doesn't have to be visual. So you can use terms that are going to connect back to those other senses. More often than not, we tend to go with visual ones, but you certainly don't have to. On Monday, we're going to take a look at Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. We're going to run through it, just getting examples, understanding what's going to be going on, how you can use eloquence. The quiz for it's not going to be till Friday of next week. And I don't think I have them up there yet, but I'll put Quizlet on in Google Classroom for all the terms so you can kind of go through that with flashcards. Next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, we're going to start going over some speech topics. I mentioned to you, PIT gives us a lot of freedom with the stuff that we do. We don't have any PIT tests or anything like that, like you might in the CHS Calc or PIT Labs or CHS Chem and all that stuff. The one requirement they do give us is they give us a topic that we have to at least explore as a class. So this next speech is when we do that. The topic is going to revolve around artificial intelligence. So that doesn't mean that we're all going to argue artificial intelligence is good or artificial intelligence is bad, but we have to kind of come up with some ideas, some resolutions that involve artificial intelligence. So it could be something as simple as, privacy when it comes to Alexa or Google Home speakers, who's on the other end. We could do things about how it's made life easier. We could do things about how, certainly not. And we can get into more sophisticated topics as well. But start kind of thinking about artificial intelligence, AI. Do you like it? Do you not like it? How often do you use it? Or there are elements that you didn't think of you really following artificial intelligence, but you realize you talk to Alexa or Siri every 5 seconds of your life. Those would be things to kind of start to consider. But that's going to be our main topic of the event. like looks like Machina.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I feel like I have Google quotes from that one or something. Because you do, like, with artificial intelligence, like, you got a ton of movies dealing with it. I mean, it could be something as simple as Wall-E, you know, or, that one I have not seen, but,
That one's just like really pretty.
iRobot,
Yeah.
you know, Will Smith, Mitchell Osmond had one. You too. Remember the kid from, he's like 30 now, but, little kid from The Sixth Sense.
Yeah.
I think there was one where he's like a robot, like Steven Spielberg, I think. I don't remember.
That sounds
Look
weird.
at stuff.
Have a nice weekend.
You too.